Don't Nod Entertainment. They're a video game developer in Paris, France. And for many, the mention of their name will bring images to mind of their iconic graphic adventure game, Life is Strange. This was one of the best-selling games on Steam in 2016, and sold more than 3 million copies by May of the following year. This game was nominated for and awarded numerous accolades, including Game of the Year and Best Game. But I've never played it. And it's not the game we're talking about today. Instead, we're going to discuss the first title that Don't Nod gave us, their virgin title, Remember Me. Okay, so why talk about this game? Well, the short answer is, it's not a very good game and nobody's going to play it anymore and people are going to forget about it, but there's more to this, so hang on. The long answer is that I was playing their more recent title, Vampire? I don't know.
I'm a vampire with a big sting.
And trust me, there's a lot to say about that game, but we'll stay away from that for now. But while thinking about the design of that game, the pros and the cons and the flaws, What am I playing? Why did I make a video about this? It got me thinking about Remember Me, a game that was flawed, but that I liked anyway. Remember Me is like finding a painting that was buried in the woods. It's pretty and all, but it's covered in mud and dirt. You can't hardly appreciate it. And what's more, it's been buried a long time, and people have basically forgotten it exists, since the artist went on to do much better work anyway. But there are parts and pieces to this artistic creation that had so much going for it. A unique aesthetic, original gameplay concepts and mechanics, and an engrossing setting and story that, spoiler warning, had a neat little twist at the end. This tortured metaphor got me thinking. How am I supposed to share the good parts of what Remember Me was without convincing a ton of people to go and buy an old game that even I don't think was very good? And so here we are, with this new series where I plan on talking about, breaking down, and doing a little design philosophy on video games. In this episode, we're going to figure out what killed Remember Me, why it was forgotten, and more importantly, why it should be remembered. And yeah, I know, I'm trying not to make a joke out of the title, but this is what I have to work with. Anyway, let's see how we do. Light spoilers ahead, we're going to be talking about the beginning of the game, the setting, and of course, mechanics. You play as Nilin, that's this chick. And at the start of the game, your name and pain is pretty much all you know. Nilin doesn't know this at the time, but she's in a place called the Bastille, a sort of super prison that confiscates all your memories along with everything else while you're in captivity.
They strip memories like old prisons used to take away belts and shoelaces.
Nilin is special, however. She seems to hang on to one tiny bit of her memories, her name.
What is your name?
Nilin.
After having nearly all of her memories scrubbed, and almost getting the last totally wiped by the Total Recall machine by Dr. Quaid, no seriously, you're saved last second by a guy who calls himself Edge. He also leads a group of rebellious freedom fighters he's named the Errorists, and he calls you sister, so maybe he's just taking the piss.
My name is Edge. You have to trust me, sis.
I just did, bro, and now I am trapped in a coffin!
Anyway, long story short, he helps you get away from the facility, including escaping a coercive unit. Yeah, that. Once you've escaped by stowing away in a literal coffin, he starts to fill you in about the world around you, since you're still missing most of your memory juice. The story takes place in Neo-Paris. In the future world of 2084, the corporation Memorize has found a way to digitize memories, with a brain implant they invented called a Sensen. That's this. These little buggers. This little thing. And everybody else has got one. What's wrong with his? Nilin, Edge continues, is not just an errorist, but a memory hunter. A sort of elite errorist that goes around stealing important memories from high-profile targets in order to aid the errorist cause. He also adds that she's the best one out there, due to her ability to not just steal memories, but to remix them. This means she can make someone remember things differently. We'll get back to that in a second. Edge adds that he failed to protect Nilin and the other revolutionaries from being rounded up, imprisoned, and memory wiped. And that's where the game began. And what about Nilin exactly? And Edge for that matter. Surely there can't be much to say about an amnesiac main protagonist and her mysterious earpiece buddy without spoiling too much of the game. Well, I'll try my best to tiptoe around any details for now. Pretty much the bulk of Nillen's character development and interest comes from the fact that she's lost her memories, and as she follows Edge's instructions, she finds herself more and more conflicted with the morality of her actions and the errorist cause. Between each chapter of the game, we get these kinda spacey, trippy, artsy cutscenes where Nillen monologues and reflects on what she's done or what she's about to do, and at times she even feels wholly detached from the person she used to be.
So I ask myself, is winning this struggle worth losing my soul? Can one crime justify the reversal of another? The old Nillen seemed to have the answer.
There's a point later in the game, though, where she gets back some of her memories, note the some, that's important, and has a pretty cool revelation that adds to her conflicts. I mean, there's a downside to this whole amnesia-riddled confliction, though. Major spoilers, yada yada yada. As for Edge, he spends the whole game inciting Nillen to action, and continually squashes her qualms about doing the things they do in the name of stopping Memorize. He is eloquent and articulate, passionately vying for a revolution of memory freedom. At the same time, he is bitter and resentful about the corruption of people, memory, and power.
Private police financed by Memorize. Crowd control with a smile. One name, two heads, 1,000 reasons to bite your fingernails. Could have been a genius, but he traded his soul for a fat paycheck. But cast as shadows of our shame, something we are meant to fear, another justification for the errorist cause.
His poetic prose sort of juxtaposes the virulence he feels towards the world, as he acts as a sole guide for Nillen in action and morality. So those two are basically the main characters, but real quick...
Whoopee! Edge did it! Come here, sweetheart!
This is Nillen's buddy, Headache Tommy. He runs a bar called the Leaky Brain. Apparently they're old buddies, and maybe Tommy used to be a memory hunter with her, like a partner or something. Maybe imagine a prequel called, like, Forget You, or something like that.
You really can't remember this pretty boy face of mine?
Anyway, let's talk about the setting now. Suddenly memories become a commodity, and by extension, monetized. And what could go wrong with that? Well, a lot of things, apparently. Topical for today, the game has heavy themes of wealth disparity, and since memories are now part of the fiscal streams of Neo-Paris, we see particularly the effects on the poor end of the spectrum. Leapers. That's these guys. The metaphor is a little muddy in places, but the basic idea is that these guys have been addicted to memories and lived and relived them so much that their sense ends and their minds have degraded. This, somehow, also seems to make them violent, wreaks havoc on their bodies, and grants them some kind of weird hive mind link with each other. Yeah, I don't get it either. So that's the Leapers, aside from Johnny Greentooth over here, but he comes later. That's the low end, but what about the high end of this memory dystopia? Well, first of all, 2084 fashions are, well, something. It seems like the more money you have, the more you have to dump into crazy clothes. Maybe it's a rule in the future, I don't know. And while we start the game in the dumps, Nillen finds herself in some more wealthy areas, and we see what the wealthy elite are like. Take this lady, for example. She's basically high as a kite on memories, and she has no idea where she lives. But since it's a nice neighborhood and she's obviously well off, the cops are legitimately taking her home. We see that other wealthy figures live in massive, tall buildings adorned with statues and artistic flourishes. They're impeccably clean and even have some peacekeeping forces. Tellingly, the people who are the most wealthy tend to be in the most control of memories and memory-related facilities.
Little shrew, I'm going to teach you the real power of memory games.
Now we arrive at the meat and potatoes of the game. Gameplay. Gameplay in Remember Me is broken up into two parts. Combat and, well, not combat. Yeah, whatever this is. Kind of like a slow-motion Mirror's Edge? Question mark? I don't know. Wikipedia describes the non-combat elements as platforming and exploration. Platforming maybe, but exploration I think is a bit disingenuous. And here we come to one of the cruxes of Remember Me's faults. The game is aggressively linear. The main story set pieces are basically just connected by single long hallways of platforming sections, with odd puzzles thrown in occasionally. Sure, every once in a while you can go down a slightly different corridor or maybe backtrack for half a minute to get a bonus upgrade or maybe a story collectible, but altogether the game is linear to a fault. I honestly think that a more open world or open city sandbox style game set in Neo-Paris would be great. How cool would it be to get to know the city, from the slums to the tallest corporate buildings, and assessing the situation, gathering information on a target, and going all Assassin's Creed on a certain person that you need to steal memories from, or remix for the errorist cause? I mean, that's awesome, right? That's a good point, actually. Let's talk about remixing. We've covered some of the things that I like and dislike about the game. Now let's delve into something I love about it. Nilin is special in that she can not only pilfer memories, but alter them as well. At multiple points in the game, you'll dive into specific important memories of others, and make slight, small changes to things in order to start a sort of chain of effect that'll significantly affect the outcome of the memory, leaving the target with a different recollection of that time. Admittedly, sometimes it feels just a little more trial and error than careful planning of what these changes might cause, but seeing the different ways that memories react to different changes is honestly fun anyway, so not a big deal. And so you play through these memories a few times, testing different changes, sometimes avoiding messing with one thing or trying a couple of different choices and rewinding again. And by the way, when you're playing with a controller, rewinding is done in a neat way, kind of like reversing a tape with the analog sticks. It's really neat, which I'm sure nobody else thinks is as clever as I do, until finally, satisfyingly, the result you wanted to come to pass happens. It's really unique and fun and clever, and unfortunately, it only happens like 4 times throughout the game. Yeah, I know, there's always a catch. But enough waffling, man. We need to know about the actual punchy combat we keep seeing in the clips. Alright, well, honestly, there's not a lot left to say here. Combat is okay. While you can shoot people with data bolts from what is basically the Omni tool from Mass Effect, generally speaking, you're going to be beating up people the old-fashioned way. You have a sort of combo builder that you pick different attack combinations from, and there's multiple kinds of attacks. Some deal more damage, some restore health, others lower cooldowns for S-pressins, more of that in a second, or multiplying the effect of the preceding pressin. Oh, and they're called pressins, by the way, whatever that means. Punches and kicks are attached to X and Y on your classic Xbox controller, and unlocking a move is done when you get enough PMP, essentially experience points. You put different combinations of these unlocked attacks into the preset punch and kick combos that unlock over the course of the game. You perform the combos in combat while dodging, flipping, and weaving through enemies. It's really stylish and fun at first, but another shortcoming of the gameplay is that it's also fairly repetitive. Of course, you can always get your hands on some sweet Street Fighter DLC for the spinning bottle kicker. On that note, quick sidetrack, this is a Capcom property, and I'm salty that the game didn't have enough traction for Nilin to make it into Marvel vs. Capcom. Her flashy fighting style would have been a great fit, not to mention all of her S-pressins would have made for perfect supers. Oh right, S-pressins. So every now and then Nilin can use a special ability and really go buck wild in combat. You start off with just 1, but get 5 by the end of the game. They all do pretty neat things, though in most combat you can pretty much spam whichever one you want and still get a good effect, so... Is that good design?
I believe I can fly.
Yes, except for the one that only works on robots, which is useless unless there are indeed robots in the combat. Aside from that, you can basically go Super Saiyan with your attacks, sticky someone with a data bomb, stun all your enemies, or even invis yourself and sneak attack a single target for an insta-kill, like you're a stinking Dungeons & Dragons rogue, you dirty D6 throwing son of a... It's all fun and exciting, sure, but once again, you'll be doing it all so many times that it'll lose its magic before the end. Probably long before the end, to be honest. Quick digression though, if you look at the Remember Me Wikipedia page, there's a screenshot on there with Nilin shooting some dumb mofos in the face. But if you look closer, yeah, look at that. There's 6 S-pressins on the UI. I only have 5 in my game. The icon of the mysterious 6th power seems to be the wings that Nilin gets when she learns new powers. Maybe this screenshot is from some beta version, or maybe I just have a junky copy of the game. Either way, I'm just expressing my curiosity. I'm sorry. Hey guys, while I was editing this video, I actually came across the answer to this. Turns out the screenshot is from a gameplay trailer from Gamescom back in 2012, so it actually was an early build of the game. But this rabbit hole goes a little deeper. I also found this old trailer, which I apparently never saw back in the day. And guess what it shows? What looks to be a much more sandboxy version of the game, with Nilin sneaking around the city, free roaming to her target in order to remix them. It even has her grabbing what looks like memories for side quests. Wow, look at the original Edge.
Now he's been promoted, he could be a real threat. Take him out for us.
And to top it all off, Nilin's outfit is way cooler. It's a real shame because this looks like exactly what Remember Me needed. And, well, what I wanted. Anyway, back to the original video. Okay, so this video is already way longer than I wanted it to be, so I'm just gonna blitz through some of the less important and less memorable stuff before we wrap up. Remembrance. So this is basically just a superimposed augmented reality thing using other people's memories. They help you figure out which way to go, how to open a door, or otherwise solve puzzles. It's not that impressive. Stealth, you stinking rogue. Sometimes you need to stay outside of the security robot sensors. It's really basic and adds very little to the gameplay. Not very fun. Contextual power. Occasionally you'll need to use your spammer, junk bolt, or force spammer to affect objects in the environment. It's very contextual and unimpressive. Enemies. They're interesting enough, but lacking in variety. You fight the same big robot twice, tons of nearly identical leapers, aside from the ones that turn invisible, which is kind of really just annoying, and you have to wait for your S-Pressons to come off cooldown, and if you can't get a light going, it's not great. And a lot of the time you'll just be fighting loads of color-swapped riot cops, each with their own gimmicks. Like your standard garden variety ones, or your riot shield ones, or the ones that damage you every time you hit them, so you have to use your healing Pressons every time you hit them. Otherwise you're going to die before you finish your combo, and that means that it's just going to take a lot longer to do because you can't use your damaging Pressons instead, you piece of shit. Boss battles. Kid Christmas was honestly the hardest for me to beat when I first played the game. I'm not sure why, considering he's the first boss, but he's pretty simple. Madame is annoying, you need to just wait on cooldowns to get lucky hitting the right mirror image. Johnny Greentooth is pretty much just one of the stealthing leapers with a lot of health. And the final boss is pretty much just a tank and spank. And most of these bosses have a quick time event button pressing God of War, Shenmue, whatever button pressing challenge at the end. It's really quite primitive. Oh, and then there was that time you had to go up against a gun copter. That was okay.
This little Red Riding Hood's got a basket full of kick-ass!
A basket full... What? I wanted to talk about Remember Me not because it was a forgotten treasure, nor a hidden gem. I wanted to talk about it because it was a diamond in the rough that had been lost to time. I honestly believe that a sequel could trim off 90% of the flabby, repetitive gameplay, add some variety to the enemies, toss in a lot more branching character progression options, maybe even try the sandbox approach I mentioned earlier. I don't doubt for a second it would be super popular. The wacky, over-the-top characters, the distinctive aesthetic, expanding on the more forgettable mechanics like Remembrance and the stealth segments, maybe give us more remixing opportunities. Quirkiness right alongside the topical commentary woven into the narrative.
Political ideals are so last millennium.
It's just begging for a do-over, for a second chance. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's not like Don't Nod don't have the money for it now. Considering the success they've had with some other game I forget the name of. It bears mentioning that a sequel for Remember Me has had its entire story totally written, but it was never made because Capcom felt a sequel wouldn't be viable.
Holy shit.
Maybe because Don't Nod wasn't doing very well financially after making the original game, despite it selling over 1 million copies? I don't really know how that all works out, but all I'm saying is I'm probably the only one who thinks this, but I wish they'd just work on a sequel for that rather than more Life is Strange. Or Vampire.